All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasha Wolf, recording from the Bearsville Theater in Woodstock, New York. And I'm joined, as usual, by my good friend and my producer. The pathetic thing is that, I wasn't planning on making a joke. And yet, even up until the end, I was just hoping something was going to come to me. And sadly, it didn't. So I'm sorry, Michael Chovan Dalton. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Apparently not very funny, but I'm fine.
It's hard to be funny when you're frozen.
That's true. It is. It is hard to be funny when you're frozen. How's everything down your way?
Doing all right. Yesterday I had a pretty busy day, both, in the darkroom with my Photo 101 students and then over to the gallery to install our first in-person show since the pandemic. So it had just a hint of normalcy, but of course, still have to arrange everything with security and wear masks and eat lunch in the car and everything else. But yes, there were parts that felt pretty good.
Good. It's really, I fully get now that, we're going to really slow roll into normalcy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Right? We are going to slow roll into normalcy. It's not going to be a wake up one day or even 1 month, frankly. It's just little by little by little by little, I guess.
Yeah, you just hope that they somehow figure out this vaccine rollout where we're not all broken into categories and you could just make an appointment and get one.
I know the vaccine thing is, I'm seeing a lot of vaccine envy going around now and who's getting vaccinated and
Yes.
the sort of slightly haphazard nature of the whole thing. But anyway, happy for people who have been vaccinated.
Yes, that's right.
Well, let me just mention once again and thank the Aperture Foundation. We have our coupon code for our listeners. So if you go to Aperture, when you go to checkout, use the code PhotoWork30, you will get 30% off books. So a continued great deal.
I wanted to ask you how you were doing because I know since we've started this show, you've picked up some business.
Well, I've definitely picked up some business, thank God, because that's how I make a living. But I think what you're hinting at is... Yeah, so I did. I announced this over the past few weeks, but I started officially working with representing both Christine Potter and Danielle Bowman, two people who have been on the show. Yep. Thank you.
So great.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Christine and I have been talking about working together for a long time, so things sort of just came together, and I'm over the moon. Really just so thrilled. And then, I met Danielle Bowman when, she won the Aperture Portfolio Prize last year, and I sort of got to know her a little bit around the time that, we arranged for her to be on the podcast. And then I was so fond of her. I like her so much, and I believe in her work so much. And so, yes, I brought her on board, and listen, it's a great honor for me anytime an artist, wants to work with me. And so I'm just, and when it's people who I also really, really like being around.
Well, that's part of your model, and we've had discussions about that. But at some point, I think we could have a whole conversation about what your conversations are like when you approach someone and how that
definitely.
works out.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, definitely. That's a really good idea, Michael. Maybe sometime in the next month we'll do a show and we can really get into that, because I know people, our listeners, will probably be pretty curious about that. And I'll talk to Christine and Danielle and make sure they're okay with me sharing those conversations and we can get into it. But anyway, it is really exciting. And I'm actually heading back to the city next week after sort of living up here for the past 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I just have so much work right now, knock wood. I've got a lot going on. Chris Graves and I are working on a big portfolio project, and between that and other, the normal amount of book projects and projects with other artists, and then Danielle and Christine, one of the things I have at home that I don't have here, and this artists will understand what I'm about to say, the importance of this, is I have huge, huge work tables. And I need that space. I need to spread out. I need to be looking at prints. I just need all that space. I just got a lot going on I'm really thrilled about, but it's easier for me to work from home.
Well, we definitely want to, I want to include that in that conversation about how you even look at the work. Because I know people who like stacks, and I know people who like looking at everything all at once, kind of spread out, especially when laying out books, things like that. So that's a good conversation.
Yeah.
Too.
No, and I can definitely talk about like bringing new artists on and how to get them integrated and how I learn about their work, and so that I feel I can really stand up for it when I'm talking to clients about it. But anyway, it's a very exciting time. I'm thrilled, and I have very mixed feelings about going home. Not sure how long I'll be there, but
right,
I'll be back up here again. It's my sort of second home, but I think I'm basically going home more or less, returning.
Yeah.
So,
well, I bet Bearsville's really nice when it's warm out too.
Yes, it is really nice when it's warm out. I've bordered on getting snow blind, since I've the snow is now officially over Peanut's head. So when we go for walks in the woods, this is true. It's sort of fantastic. She has to walk in my footsteps. Oh my! So I wear really amazing snow boots that basically come up to my knees, and gaiters and snow pants. I mean, it's just unbelievable up here. And for people who don't, just to visualize, I'm in a house that sort of backs up into the woods, and then I can sort of just walk through the woods with Peanut. And but now she can't get out of my footsteps because she would disappear. Peanut, where have you gone? Have to dig her out. So that's how much snow is up here. But anyway, it's quite beautiful. Yeah. I'll be returning to New York for that very special New York version of brown and yellow snow. But
yes, I know it's not gonna be snowblind white, but
but as a native New Yorker, I have some affection for that brown and yellow snow. So today's episode was a conversation with the great Mark Steinmetz. How did you find the episode?
Yes. In the beginning, when you ask the artists about, where they got to where they are, Mark gives a pretty detailed answer. And, at one point he even says, am I going on too long, or is this too much, or something like that. But it's really nice to hear everything all at once. When you follow an artist, when you're interested in their work, it's just nice to have that all in one place. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was really wonderful. I think it's a nice conversation. I mean, Mark is, I think there's a lot of really good information in the conversation.
Absolutely. You actually have a pretty interesting back and forth too about how your work changes, or how your work evolves, or how you react to photographing in different places. And, Mark has this perspective as the person making the work, and you have this perspective as someone who enjoys looking at the work. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. I sort of, basically imply that there's been a real steadiness to his work, but he really pushes back against that to a certain extent. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, listen to it and you'll see how.
I think that's
it is. It's
great.
A really interesting moment. I really love that. I, of course, at the end say something silly, but I'm trying to tease out when he started sort of making more landscape work because I'm a
Oh,
huge
right.
fan of that work. And I say something like, seems like you started making more about 12 to 14 years ago. But the truth is that, that's based on my experience with the work. So I was very connected to his work of people, and then I came to his landscape work later. But he's been making it for like 30 years or something. So he's a little perplexed by that, and I sorry about that, Mark. But anyway, it's there's a lot in the episode.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of like you're looking at the work, and that's the way you sort of put it in your head. Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, well, let's get to it. And thank you so much, as usual, for hanging out with me. And if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure. And here's your conversation with Mark Steinmetz.
Mark Steinmetz, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being my guest. And so I always ask people to just give a little background info on themselves. So if you could just tell people a little bit about your journey to, where you are today.
Okay. Well, where I am today is in Athens, Georgia. I'm in the studio of a place called The Humid, where I've taught some workshops with my wife, Irina Rozovsky. And I mean, it's been a long life. So my mother was French, my father was Dutch. They moved to the States in the 50s, and I was born in the early 60s in New York City. So I was there for a few years, and we went to the Boston area around Cambridge, Mass, and then Newton, Mass, and then we moved to Iowa City, Iowa, for junior high school and high school. So I feel like in Iowa I had sort of, a real exposure to an American kind of high school and way of being. But the rest of me feels pretty European. But I was always been photographing, and I think I was around 12 when I first set up my darkroom in Iowa City. It was sort of where the furnace was, under these stairs in a little sort of closeted area. And it was great. In those days, you could walk into a camera store and you could see everything that you would need. And but anyway, the owner of the camera store came over and set up what I needed. And so I've been photographing and printing since like the age of 12. After Iowa City, I went to college out east, 1 year at Middlebury, and then the rest at Wesleyan. And then I went to the Yale School of Art straight out of college, and that was, maybe a little too soon, but I dropped out after the first semester to go to Los Angeles, which seems pretty extraordinary to me now. But I met Garry Winogrand and photographed with him. But I was 22 at the time, and I mean Yale was. I thought at the time that I'd learned everything that I needed to learn. That Todd Papageorge gave a great talk on Cartier-Bresson, and I learned about exposing and developing the film properly. Kind of felt good to go. But I was in LA for a spell. I returned kind of just money was hard. I was doing assisting for like commercials, production assistant on some films. I was taking slides for artists, taking slides of their artwork. Then it's just been really roundabout. I went back to Yale. After Yale, I went to the Boston area and worked as a commercial photographer, a freelance photographer. I had a little card that said people photography. And this is so strange. This is my life in a nutshell. It's a little like a pinball machine. Then I go to Chicago, and I'm there for 4 years, and at these times, I'm working on bodies of work like that have come out in Summertime or Summer Camp or The Players. And I'd been doing a tiny bit of teaching in Chicago, but mostly it was freelance photography for like Northwestern University or the University of Chicago, and photographing their professors, photographing their events. But then I got a call late, it was in the summer, to teach at the University of Knoxville to replace Baldwin Lee. And I went to Tennessee, and it was great. I really loved photographing the South, and I was there mostly for 2 years. But I just had a 1-year appointment, and I stayed there for 2 years. I applied for a job at the University of Georgia here in Athens, which I didn't get, but I was hired to photograph or to teach for them in their studies abroad program in Italy. And then I had no place in Knoxville, and some friends from Knoxville were moving to Athens, Georgia. And so I ended up here, and I've stayed here. It's a good place to live. The housing market had always been very kind to artists. It's sort of changing now. And that's it. Ta-da, here I am. But I've been leaving. I've left a lot. I've taught in at Yale a few semesters. I've taught at Harvard and Sarah Lawrence, and I've just had reason to be in other places. So I've been here most of the time, but I also take off. It's been sort of home base.
So let me ask you, I don't know if you're going to agree with this premise, but I think of you as a more personal photographer than Garry Winogrand. And, sort of less run and gun. You're making more of a connection with the people you're photographing. There's more of a sort of tacit understanding that you're taking their picture, even if you're not hanging out and, whatnot. But I wonder if when you were hanging around with Garry, were you aware of that distinction? And yeah, I guess just how did you think about it? Because Garry was already sort of so much of a giant. And I know a lot of artists who were working, particularly in New York, a lot of the gang that hung around with Garry. And a lot of them were making pictures in a very similar style. I think there are definite differences between them, but in a very similar style. But I don't put you in that group. So I'm just wondering, assuming you agree with that, sort of how did you have, I guess, the confidence to just sort of know that that wasn't the type of work you were interested in doing?
Well, I semi-agree with that. First, let me just say I deeply love his pictures, and
Me too.
You talk about personal, or it's not quite clear. I think my pictures are more intimate. There is a more, a lot of kids,
intimate. I agree.
There's a sense that they are, not out in the street, but he really goes. He can, somebody can flash their eyes, and he's got a picture, and it's just you go so deep into their, their predicament, and I think like my pictures. I'm not sure which books of mine you're familiar with. There's a series, 3 books actually, Angel City West. Those are made in LA, and it's a lot of it is learning or walking in the footsteps of not just Garry but Lee Friedlander, Robert Frank. I think there's something different about the pictures because I'm making them, and there are other things in the mix, not just photography. I'm hugely influenced by film noir, the films of Antonioni, just many filmmakers.
So let me just stop you there for a second, because so what does that mean exactly? Like, how does that? By the way, I was a filmmaker in my previous life.
I think mood, and I think for sequencing the books, I think it's very helpful to have gone over, Antonioni movies and just gone over them scene by scene, just really slowly dissecting and just seeing how a movie is built. You begin at the beginning and you conjure up something, it's the same too with the film noir. They're really well structured. So I learned a lot about structure through filmmaking, but also I think just mood and feeling.
You're also talking about, I mean, Antonioni in some ways, was sort of putting together almost still photographs to create. I mean, it's very little plot in Antonioni films. I mean, they're really picture-driven, they're image-driven. So it seems like a really great inspiration. And even, the best film noir is really visual. I mean, you think about a film like Double Indemnity, or they're so driven by the lighting and how the lighting influences things. So I understand what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. But back then, you probably weren't thinking so much in terms of books. So you must have. I mean, was there a narrative element that you were thinking about?
I was thinking of. I mean, I guess you're thinking about making great pictures that can be, stand the test of time, and that maybe MoMA would shine upon, or but making books at that time was a real kind of a privilege was sort of beyond me at that. Now it's very easy to put together a book. Everybody has a software, and you can self-publish. And in those days, it's like no way. It's like you'd have to go through. A publisher, and they'd have their agenda, and very, very, very different time. Books were few and far between, and and most of them now they weren't printed so well. Only the ones that Richard Benson had a hand in were well printed. Some from, some printed in Switzerland with gravure were, but it's like they weren't super great. At least not in the early 80s, I think.
Can I ask you, your work has always seemed really confident to me when I look at it, from the early pictures to the work you're doing now. It almost feels like it has a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it quality, which isn't to say that it hasn't evolved, but I don't know, like I work with artists, and, it's pretty unusual. Like most artists, especially when they get in funks, or if the industry isn't being nice to them or seeming to care, then they start tinkering. But I don't really see that with your work. So I'm just wondering, like, how you maintain that confidence when, I think seemed like there was a long time where the industry was pointing in a different direction. And so, how did you think about making work during those times, and how have you sort of stayed so connected to your compass and inner voice? I know people sometimes hate it when I use that phrase, but...
Well, I don't know what to say other than, I think I do have a strong sense of self. I have always been, not totally left out of the dialogue. There's always been something, a show here, or, a small grant there. But, I just have an obsession and a love for it. So that's mainly it. And, I don't really get swayed by other people and what they're doing. I think early on I grasped that, there are fads, there are things that are like less essential, and like a lot of people gravitate towards that. And my question is more for them, like why are you, why does everybody follow a certain, people can be so swayed. I don't know. One thing that Garry, his example was, he was totally, self-determined. He just said, the world is full of seductions. To me, that meant, watch out and don't get sucked down them. The important thing is doing great work. And I think at Yale, I was there for the first semester, and then I did come back. And, well, in college, I think it was great sitting around a table and reading classics, and you have a small group of people, and that, here's some work done, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and it still matters to people, and they're still discussing it intelligently. And then at Yale, you see the work of Cartier-Bresson or Auger, and it's kind of discussed in a way that's rich and so I just knew that it was possible, and I think that emboldened me. I knew that whatever I was doing, that there could be, if I did it right, that there's a chance that it would be taken up and be seen and known in the future. So I'm not sure what to say. I guess I've got some patience. I think I didn't have much of a choice either. It's not like I'm super gifted at, promoting myself. But I mean, everything's been pretty good. I wouldn't change things,
When you're shooting, are you like, maybe it's different now because you have become really quite well known, but I wonder, like, how do you think about audience and viewers and when you're shooting? And do you think about them at all? Like who's going to look at the pictures? Does that enter your mind?
I would say not really. I guess I would say not really. I would like, I send my books to some photographers. I want them to see it.
Can you talk about who? You don't have to. Of course.
Well, I would send a book to Todd Papageorge or Tom Roma. I've got some friends from college. I would send books to. I sent some books to Peter Galassi the other day. I want some people just to see the work. I send books to Robert Adams.
Did Peter put you in your first museum show? Was that a MoMA?
Well, it was actually Sarkowski who bought the first prints, and I think he put...
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, very nice. And and he put them... then they were up on the wall at some point. I don't know who was responsible for that. And then I was in a new photography. It was a while back. It was Edward Robinson, who was the Newhall fellow at the time, who managed that show. But I think it was everybody's decision at the time.
That must have been thrilling.
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, like at that time, I didn't have much money, and so I just moved to Athens, and I went up to the opening, and that was sort of it. Then I came back down here and just was working, and so I didn't really savor it. I didn't see the show twice. I didn't pound the pavement. I thought that things would open up more than they did, but not really.
Yeah, I always try and I don't know if warn is the right word, but anyway, let's just say warn. I always try and warn artists that to just be careful about those moments. It's interesting because you said you didn't really savor it, and I do think it's super important to really be present and mindful in those moments when you have those little achievements and successes and people are patting you on the back and saying that they love what you're doing and doing a good job, and to sort of sit with that because it's very meaningful, I think.
Well,
but also to be careful.
I would be careful of wanting your back patted too. Like the same people. You don't want to start pleasing people. With your work and wanting to have the same outcome again, or having that as a requirement for judging that your work is a success.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I always think of the back pats as the ones that are meaningful as coming from the people you respect, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I say this on the podcast and in life all the time, that to me, success is, having the people that I respect me. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I know for myself that when the achievements that have been the most meaningful are when that happens, when I get that respect from people I respect. But I do want to say that I think one does have to be really careful of getting on the sort of roller coaster ride, and that can be, I think, really psychically harmful because the industry is very, the winds are constantly changing and people, and so I think a career like yours that's sort of very steady is a really great career. And it's the type of career I think people should sort of try and point their career toward or how they think about it. So to me, it makes the most sense. Let me ask you, how do you build series? Because, I mean, I have a lot of questions about this with you, but I know that...
First, let me just look at the word career for a second. I mean, I guess in a way, there's no such thing as a career as a photographer, and Winogrand was always, I mean, for what I do, Winogrand was always saying, how do you survive? That's how he would frame it.
Yeah.
And people like, Richard Benson was at Yale, and he made it very clear to me that there's no real relationship between financial success and quality. That was his take. And
yeah, I agree.
I'm like, okay, well, so I think it's good to have, maybe, just knowing what's enough, and then when you have, you've agreed that this is enough, and then taking satisfaction from that. And I think it's kind of this word "more" that can get you into trouble. I just would have the word career just a little bit, maybe with quotes around it, or in.
Yeah, I don't think of career as having anything to do with finances, but
okay.
If I did, I'd be in a lot of trouble myself. So let me ask you about building series, because, let's see if I can say this somewhat articulately. I know you'll bail me out when I start getting incoherent, but I know that your books, some of the book titles are different than the titles on your website. So there is no 15 Miles to Kayville or Angel City West on your website. You have, early Los Angeles work. Mm-hmm. Some things obviously correlate, South Central, Southeast, etc., but some things don't. And I think that, to me, that connects a lot to the fact that, I also don't think it really matters in many cases where your pictures were made, right? Like, the fact that South Central is Knoxville seems, to me, somewhat irrelevant, right? It's not really about Knoxville. It's about just these moments with human beings. So I just wondering, like, how do you use these sort of titles and series? Like, is it parameters that just are helpful for books and exhibitions, or sometimes it's really
the website is maybe I need to update things now or reconsider. I kind of have a horror of people coming to my work through my website or through the internet. I kind of like, how wonderful it would be just to see the books in their entirety, and that's just how you approach the work from the get-go. But I understand that it's all on the internet now. Maybe I just need to. There are a lot of bodies of work that are not on the website. It's not. I guess I have a bit of a. Maybe I need to change my attitude about my website, make it a little more spiffy.
I think your website is fine. I think I'm curious more about just organizing principles. Look, I mean, I think it's really clear with like Summer Camp or The Players, by the way, both books, bodies of work, I absolutely love.
Thank you.
But I'm just thinking, like, in some ways, I'm trying to understand, I guess, what the organizing principle is for certain things.
South Central, the name comes from the South Central Bell. A lot of the pictures are made of people on payphones, and I did want to avoid Knoxville because this is not Knoxville. It's. But it is sort of a medium-sized American city that doesn't have, that's not Florida, that's not California, that's not the desert. It's sort of, it could be Omaha maybe. I think you could find these things in any medium-sized city or even a larger city, but just on some outskirts. So it is. And I wanted the title to be kind of useless that way and bureaucratic. And Southeast is sort of the same. It does point that it's in the South because that work has maybe more feeling of the South. There's a little more kudzu and it roams around a bit. There's some from Mississippi and Louisiana. But South Central was in a pretty concentrated period of time, 1991 to 1993. It was actually late 91 to mid 93. So something about like 18 months of work. And
Yeah.
so I think there is something to, although some bodies of work like The Players or Summer Camp are done over many years, and Greater Atlanta is done over many years.
Yeah.
I think there's something to just having a body of work that has the same kind of, psychic mindset, kind of like the early work of Cartier-Bresson. It's wonderful to have that work gathered together and not spread out with his later pictures. But all those were done with, one was made with the Fuji 645, but the rest were made with the Fuji 6.9 with, a 90 millimeter lens, and there might have been just a couple on a tripod. But basically the way the depth of field is handled is the same. With Southeast, it does shift because I've moved to Athens, and there are younger people in that body of work, a little more countercultural. And also I'm using, it's a bit of a technical point, but I'm using a 75 millimeter lens on a 6x9 camera with, which is often on a tripod. And there are pictures done of people by appointment. So it is it's different in spirit and in terrain.
Can you talk about that change a bit? What were you thinking when you started shooting?
Simply, I thought I had done a great job in Knoxville, and now I was in Athens, Georgia, which is a very different town. And I was, it's like I follow the energy. It's like all of a sudden, it's just I'm more interested in all these young people who are in rock and roll bands. And
were you getting more comfortable with people, with interacting with people when you were making the pictures, or?
Well, in Knoxville, I was there, and I came down from Chicago, and I had very few friends. I had some neighbors who were ceramicists in the art department I was teaching in, and I basically hung out with them. And other than that, I was single, and I had just all this free time. So, and it was my first foray into the South, and it was a very different place. And then coming down to Athens, Georgia, all of a sudden it seemed like a very modern place. The kids here were very hip. And Knoxville is at the crossroad of highways and railway lines. There are a lot of transient people, and I photographed more hitchhikers, in that book. And here it was, I don't know if I'm more comfortable, I'm just more, the only way to photograph what I was seeing was by, asking people. I mean, my interest just shifted. I wanted to look at, younger people. There are a lot of women in the book, more so than in South Central.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're just sort of almost growing up and becoming more confident, but I'm analyzing you. I do tend to start psychoanalyzing people I'm talking to at a certain point.
I don't know. I mean,
I
think Cartier-Bresson, Helen Levitt photographed kids, and I think in the 20s that's a very reasonable thing. That's what you know well.
Yeah.
The people I was photographing, most of them were like 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
It was really, it's sort of like, I want to say, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, I was seeing faces, I was seeing people, and I was more interested in them. And the only way to get my camera in the right spot was really to have, to ask and make an appointment, and take out the tripod to really make the picture that I wanted to make. So it's sort of like I had a vision of what I wanted, and then I had to execute it. But there's a lot of other stuff. There's kind of running around in that book. There are pictures from the road in that book too. It's a mix.
So, I think I just heard a dog bark.
Yeah, there's a dog. There's a architect studio next to this, and they've got a dog.
I'm a big dog fan. All dog barking, good.
Okay.
So One thing that seems has come on strong in the past, you'll have to tell me because I don't know. I'm going to guess and say like 12, 14 years, is the landscape work. I'm just curious about, because I love your landscapes. I mean, some of my absolute favorite pictures are those really tender, beautiful landscapes that have some random animal in them. I don't know why I find those so heartbreaking, but I do. And I'm just wondering, when you sort of what you were thinking about when you started shifting to doing more landscape work, and how that felt to you and when you started, and how it feels to you now.
Well, it's sort of interesting when I look at early negatives from Los Angeles. There are some pictures of trees and vines in there. So it was something sort of in the back burner for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
As I said earlier, I had been photographing in Italy a bit when I was teaching there for the University of Georgia, and we were in a very small town, Cortona, in Tuscany, in a hilltop town, and I went there first in '93, and then I was there in '96 and '98, and I've been photographing all these, pictures in Knoxville and driving around, and now I was in this kind of cute, picturesque town, and I couldn't really photograph, the old people with their dogs, and just, I tried to photograph the students a bit. But there were all these olive trees out there, and I really connected with the olive trees, just their calligraphic shapes. They just have, the older ones are the wilder ones, and they have all this nervous energy. So I had to keep photographing. So I just went down into down the slopes of these, from this town, and photographed the olive trees, and did that more and more. And I took lots of pictures in Italy too. We would go on the weekends to places like Rome or Florence, and then I would just change my hat. I'd have the Fuji, and I could speak some Italian to make pictures of people. And I love photographing in the cities there. That was great. And then I was teaching in other places in 2001 in Johnson City, Tennessee, and just beautiful countryside around there. So I'm not sure exactly which ones you're talking about. There were also pictures near here, just really a mile from where I live, Sandy Creek, and those pictures I took maybe coming a little bit from exhaustion. I've photographed a lot of people and America, and I just thought I needed to exercise more, and so I was, meditating a bit, and it's okay. So walks in nature, that's very good. So I walked in nature once, and then saw so many things to photograph that I just came back, and then I'm just carrying this tripod and going into the deep woods, but I'm always interested in just trying out, even though you've sort of said I've been steady, but I like trying out different things, like, what kind of photographer would I be in the woods, or what kind of, how would I be in farmland,
right.
and even a bit, there's been some traveling, and so what can I do in Bangkok or Shenzhen, and we're in Kyrgyzstan, and it's, I feel good about it. I feel like a world citizen. I feel like I can respond to trees. It's, there's some things I've probably never photographed, and I just have no interest in, but there's a lot that I am interested in. And trying to stretch myself, one thing, just to keep quoting Winogrand, I think it was very important, all the things he said. One thing he said is, like he praised Picasso. Picasso kept changing what he was doing, and he would say, if you see something that looks like a picture, don't take it. He's always trying to, lasso out and reach out for something a little more, ineffable. And I think that's true. Like, I guess I have a quick boiling point for being bored, so I just don't want to be there. And it's like, so don't be there. Don't do the same thing,
Let me just ask you one last question. Is this been a meaningful life for you, a life as a photographic artist?
I love my life. I'm so happy with how it's gone. I mean, I think there's been a lot of. First, I want to say, getting older is wonderful. Just whoever wants to hear that. I think you get, more and more into your, to who you are, and you get freer. That's kind of the game, I think. You want to maneuver yourself where you are, just alive. When you're young, you think that, oh my God, I feel so much more than these older people, but it's not really, it just depends on the older person, I think. But it's been everything. It's how I've shaped things. And I love doing it. Certainly it's been frustrating at times, and there have been fallow periods. I was asked in a previous talk if there's anything, that I could tell myself as a younger person. And, I really just drew a blank. I think you just have to go through everything. But it's important to embrace your life, and patience is really helpful.
Well, I agree on the patience thing. And I personally agree with, everything you just said. And
well, I could say that, like if you could take a pill, and by taking that pill, then you would know the decision to make in every moment. I think your life would be so boring in an instant, So it's the not knowing, and just trying to judge, and just trying to navigate your feelings to find your way. I think that's kind of the game of life. Meaning. I think meaning in life is just the meaning that you bring to it. There are some things you like, some things that are important to you, and you focus on that. I think trying to have a big meaning, like this is the meaning of life, is just sort of a trap to make you unhappy.
Well, on that note,
okay.
Why not?
Sure.
Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and please send Irina my very best. I think she's going to be having a conversation with my producer, Michael. So I think if I'm correct, you're keeping the recording equipment
I'm not sure
for now.
I don't think they scheduled it, but I think soon.
This is pandemic efficiency. Yeah. All right. Well, yes, please send her my best, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sasha.
Bye.
Okay.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. You can hear PhotoWork on all your favorite podcast platforms. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, and be sure to subscribe on any one of those services or wherever you listen to podcasts.